For years, the world has been aware of the Chinese government's disturbing treatment of Uyghur Muslims. It's one thing to be aware of it. It is another thing entirely to be able to see it. And exact details about the so-called vocational training camps detaining Uyghur Muslims in China have been difficult to come by. Images of these detainees and facilities have been closely held by Chinese police and officials. Just this week, a huge trove of hacked data, including photographs and documents, was released and published for the first time in Western media. This new information, referred to as the Xinjiang police files, dates back to 2018 and was passed on by hackers to Dr. Adrian Zenz, a U.S.-based scholar and activist who shared it with international media. And the files actually give us a first look at the brutality faced by the Uyghur prisoners in Xinjiang.
A first-hand account of police operations inside re-education camps, of images taken during police drills, security drills in these camps. The new evidence really shows that the re-education or the so-called vocational training in Xinjiang is nothing to do with poverty alleviation, nothing to do with helping people to get jobs. It's about brutal brainwashing. It's about putting them in prison camps guarded by heavily armed police. We have evidence, in the watchtowers that they use military-grade machine guns and sniper rifles in the watchtowers. And it's very clear that this is a campaign to break a people.
And researchers and campaigners have accused Chinese authorities of imprisoning more than 1 million Uyghurs and subjecting them to forced labor, coerced sterilization, as well as destroying the Uyghur cultural heritage in Xinjiang. Chinese officials and diplomats have called such allegations the lies of the century. And Tuesday, the Chinese ambassador to the UK responded to the BBC's reporting based on the police files by tweeting, "Such a shame for BBC to carry the fabricated story about so-called detention camps." But the disturbing new information revealed in the Xinjiang police files makes all of these accusations much harder to deny. Joining me now is Dr. Adrian Zenz, a senior fellow in China studies at the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation and the man who was given these police files by the original hackers. Dr. Zenz, thank you so much for coming on. Can you describe some of the revelations from this new trove of hacked data? I mean, what shocked you the most as an expert who has tracked this and watched this closely? What does the international community need to know about what these files contain?
It's shocking to see such evidence straight from the horse's mouth. I mean, people like myself have looked at documents and publicly available evidence for years now, but it's entirely another thing to see the vivid images of police subduing detainees, handcuffing them, putting them in so-called tiger chairs that are also used for torture. Especially shocking is seeing images of 15-year-old teenage girls detained for re-education in camps, images of over 70-year-old ladies or men in camps, and speeches by high officials talking about shooting those who try to escape.
Why would the Chinese authorities and officials document this? I mean, they must know that the moment they document this and put this on servers and make the public or certainly make other officials publicly aware of it within their internal communications, that they run the risk of this getting out, despite the fact of what they've been saying to the public?
Well, in a police state, there's not much trust. And so in the Chinese government, everything has to be documented so that the higher officials know that lower officials have in fact implemented the policy and that they're up to speed. In fact, this has been one of the challenges of the re-education campaign. Early on in 2017, a local official released some detainees because he said it's bad for the economy if all these people are in camps. So he was then heavily punished for that. So the state produces a lot of records and detailed information to ensure that local officials are actually doing what they're supposed to be doing.
You mentioned that these new files prove that President Xi Jinping and the Chinese government are very aware of what happens inside these prison camps. What consequences should they face from the U.S. and the international community now that these files are public?
Well, really, there needs to be a speaking out and a condemnation of the fact that this comes from the highest levels in Beijing itself, not just from Xinjiang. And I believe that central government officials need to be subjected to sanctions, Magnitsky-style sanctions, to communicate. You can't just put this on the lower levels here and have some local Xinjiang officials sanctioned. No, I think the West needs to sanction those responsible who sit right in Beijing at the center of power.
Tell me a little bit more about the actual people there. I mean, the police files include for the first time photos of many Uyghurs imprisoned in these camps. You noted that many of the detainees are elderly Uyghurs and children in their early teens. What can you tell us about the people imprisoned in these camps based on these files?
It's really a broad sample of the population. So from teenage age all the way up to the elderly, many of those in the camps are aged between 25 and 50. Many of them are heads of households, men, influential people. Many of them are religious figures or have practiced religion. Really, the reasons for detention is the state is trying to assimilate the Uyghurs very thoroughly. And by doing so, it really has to try to capture key decision makers, influential people, heads of households, husbands especially have been detained. And if you look at the reasons for detention, really, I mean, look at a 15-year-old teenage girl. Even the police files don't say she's done anything at all. The only thing is it's guilt by association. One of her parents was detained.
You know, I got to ask you, if you could get these files and, all of what you have learned about what is happening to Uyghurs in front of President Biden and the White House, what would you want him to do? I mean, what would you say to him about these revelations and what the U.S. needs to do at this moment?
I would say that the US government has to talk about the largest atrocity of our time. I mean, what's going on in Xinjiang is probably the largest internment of an ethno-religious minority since the Holocaust, since World War II. And I mean, for this to just go on as we do other things and talk about climate or other things that also, of course, needs to be tackled, I think this needs to get more airtime. Both in the media, but also from the White House directly. Of course, the Biden administration has spoken out on the subject, but I think even for Biden himself and for leading officials to keep talking about this, to keep bringing it up and to announce new measures. And I think now with these latest revelations, we need to see sanctions on Chinese central government officials.